Gilles Deleuze really matters because he's one of the most based thinkers in a post-war French intellectual milieu, which is prone to lots of excesses and stupidities. He was never a kind of Communist Party lackey, as a lot of the other great French intellectuals of the post-war kind of French milieus were. 1968 saw an extraordinary explosion of protest energy. It was probably the closest that any advanced Western nation ever came to a kind of popular revolution. Deleuze's career spans this time. And yet, while Deleuze was very sympathetic to this explosion of energy, he was never quite captured by it. And so his work represents a very interesting window into the energy and excitement of that period without necessarily being beholden to it or intoxicated by it. One of the ideas I'm trying to evoke with this title of Based Deleuze is precisely that Deleuze had all of the brilliance and creativity that we associate with the great French intellectuals of the 20th century, but he was remarkably more grounded, I think you could say. For instance, he hated traveling. He wrote a lot about this in his theories even. He makes fun of people who always want to travel. He was married to one woman his entire life. He barely left his home. He mostly just wrote books and lived an extremely simple and well-based life. And yet he's profoundly creative and fascinating. And to a lot of people, he's very obscure and complicated and sophisticated. But at the bottom of it, I think there is a real substrate of just simplicity and common sense. And so that's one of the goals of the book, basically, is to kind of reveal the very immediate, practical, almost obviousness of some of his teachings that I think are unfortunately hidden beneath this flowery theoretical edifice, which is in a large part just an outgrowth of the culture of the time. So I'm trying to give a somewhat provocative, kind of simplistic Anglo reduction of his rather extraordinary philosophical project. What do I mean by based? Well, first of all, what I mean by based is the opposite of cringe. So Lacan, for instance, very brilliant, a lot of really good insights in Lacan, but he's a bit cringe. He sits there with his cigar and he speaks like this. And he thinks that he's a god. A lot of the great French intellectuals really did act like that and kind of talk like that and think like that. Based is the opposite of that. Deleuze was the opposite of that. He held forth in his seminars quite brilliantly, but in a very kind of humble, simple way. I think the main way that this book will change the minds of readers is to hopefully change the way that they think about what it means to be a revolutionary left-wing intellectual. Deleuze is undoubtedly a representative of the kind of radical revolutionary left-wing tradition. But when you actually look at what he thinks and what he writes, you find that it's very ideologically complicated. It's not easily reducible to any particular kind of party line at all. And so I think he's a kind of role model in this regard in a way that a lot of people don't fully understand or appreciate. Deleuze had no time for what we would call social justice warriors. And in some sense, his collaborator, Felix Guattari, is actually much closer to what we would call a social justice warrior. Deleuze, for instance, he would sign petitions here and there to be supportive vaguely. He generally had no interest in the groupie souls, is what they were known as. He also had I think a healthy contempt for the mentally ill. Like Guattari was very interested in working with the mentally ill. He ran a clinic, and Deleuze was kind of like, okay, yeah, you go do that, Guattari, but I'm not interested in that. I can't stand these schizophrenics that you hang around with. And I think he was very honest about that. He was honest in not glorifying, depression or schizophrenia, as I think, frankly, a lot of contemporary culture is prone to do. Deleuze just thought that was ridiculous, I think, and had no interest in that. And again, that's another kind of, I think, very needed counterpoint to some of the contemporary tendencies we're seeing. Yeah, so if you want to order the book, there's a link in the description right below this video. Just click it and cough up at least $5 and I'll send it to you as soon as it's done. Or if you're seeing this after it's published, then you'll automatically get the book after you order it below. It'll be available in 3 different formats for virtually any e-reader that you prefer to use. It'll be in EPUB, Mobi for Kindle readers, and a basic PDF if that's what you prefer. You'll get all 3. Thanks, folks.